So let's go ahead and open config. And here we're going to be able to get started. And basically the service, as I said, is going to be able to provide an inventory of our resources and a history of all the configuration changes. And we can evaluate rules that will give us some compliance analysis. So let's get started. The first thing we have to do is set the kind of resources you want to record. So remember, this is not a free tutorial, so if you just want to be in the free tier, just watch me do. But right now I'm going to say, okay, I want to record all the resources in this region. We could also include global resources if we wanted to record IAM resources, for example. If you don't want to tick this box, you can say, okay, I just want to record auto scaling, scaling policy, or maybe EC2, all these things under EC2, etc., etc. For me, I'm just going to record all the resources just to show you the scope of all the possible things, and I will also include the global resources. Now, basically, anytime that we have a change, we can log that change into a bucket, and it could be an AWS bucket. So we're going to say Stephane AWS Config. And we can also add a prefix if we wanted to this, but for now it is fine. So basically any configuration history and configuration snapshot files will land into S3, so we can analyze it later, maybe using Athena. We can also stream any configuration change to an Amazon SNS topic, but we're not going to tick this. And finally, because it is a new service on AWS and it needs to do a lot of things, you need to grant it a service linked role. And so we're just going to create it straight from this UI. Click on next. Now we get to choose the config rules. And so there's a lot of config rules we can choose. And basically these rules will allow us to track the compliance of some of our elements. For now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to skip this because I want to give you a good overview when we get there at the moment. So now we get into the review. We have no rules being created, and all the thing we do right now is just track all the resources configuration. I click on confirm, and now AWS config is being set up. That may take a little bit of time, so I'm just going to pause until this is done. So now my resources are being discovered, and that can take a little bit of time to be done. Okay, so my entire account has been mapped out, and as you can see, I have 71 resources in this region, which is really, really cool because I didn't even know this, right? Now I know I have 71 resources. And so I'm going to pay, obviously, because I'm tracking these resources now, but all the configuration of all these resources is going to be tracked, which is also quite safe and quite nice to know. Okay, so as we can see though, getting the resources information is not really, really great. If I click on one on security group and click on this one, well, I just get an information around what it's like, and I can get a configuration timeline, and here we go, that was the first time it was created, but there's not much that's happening really. I need to know over time if it's compliant, if these security groups are open to the world, maybe or not. So right now, there's no compliance timeline because we don't have created any rules. So what we have to do is go ahead and start creating rules. So let's go in my dashboard, and I'm going to click on add rule. So here we're going to add rules, and now we have a list of all the 82 AWS managed roles that I can add right now. So you can see basically all these roles can apply to different services. For example, this one can apply to IAM, this one can apply to EC2, this one can apply to auto scaling. And so each rule has a description of what it does. For example, this one is really cool. It's saying that if you select this rule, only the approved AMIs will be compliant. Running instances that are not using this AMI will not be compliant. And so the really cool thing about it is that now we can just say, okay, there's a bunch of AMIs in our company, and we know we have the security software, we know they're set up correctly. And if people don't use these AMIs, we'll know right away that there is a compliance violation, and we can go and talk to people to migrate to the right AMI. So that could be a really, really cool type of rule to set up. I'll cancel it. The one I want to set up though is going to be the one on SSH. So I'll just type SSH, and here is called restricted SSH. So this is a very nice rule which shows whether or not the SSH traffic can be completely unrestricted to any IPs, which is not what we want. So I'll say, okay, I want to install this rule, and I want to trigger this rule anytime a configuration changes. But we can also set periodic on some rules. For example, saying every 5 minutes I want you to check, or every day I want you to check whether or not the rule is compliant or not. Now the scope of changes could be resources, tags, or all changes. So anytime a resource changes or a tag changes or both changes, then we can trigger a configuration change check. And so for now I'll just say resources, and I'll say, okay, anytime my security group changes, then you're going to check whether or not SSH traffic is allowed. So I'll click on save. and now the rule is being evaluated. So if you remember, I had something like 7 security groups. So all the 7 security groups are going to have their compliance evaluated against this rule, and we'll be able to get the results in a second. So I'll have to wait for it to be done. And so here, what we see is that out of my rules, 3 resources were non-compliant and 4 resources were compliant. So let's just click on 2 of those to see the difference. So if I click on the compliant one, this one, well, this was creating using RDS. And if I click on the configuration itself, so let's go back to this compliant one. So this was the RDS launch wizard, and I can click on manage resources in the top right and get straight into the resource configuration. And so what I see is that, yes, there is no 22 port here being open whatsoever. But if I go to my non-compliant resource, so this one was non-compliant with one rule, this was my launch wizard 2. And if I go to manage resource, what I can see is that probably in inbound, we have SSH on port 22 from anywhere, and that makes my resource non-compliant. So what I can do is instead saying, okay, maybe only my IP should be allowed, okay? Not everywhere, but just my IP. I click on save, and now I should have made this group compliant. So what I can do now is just wait a little bit for this resource, and so automatically, because I've changed the configuration, automatically this should become compliant over time. So how do we see this? Well, we have 2 ways. We can use the configuration timeline and the compliance timeline. So I've just opened both. For the configuration timeline, as we can see here, we have the first time my resource was being discovered. So this was on the 2nd of January at this time. And we can see here, we can see whether or not there were any changes and CloudTrail events. And so the information we get here is that we also get, because we have enabled CloudTrail in the past lecture, we can see that the root user did run instances, authorize security group ingress, create security group, etc., etc. So we can see all the CloudWatch events related to that security group. But no, what we have to wait for now is basically for the configuration to change, because if we go to the compliance timeline, as we can see right now, it's not compliant, but because I just changed the security group rule, after maybe 5 minutes, it just needs a bit of time to evaluate the rule again and to be triggered, I should be seeing the compliance. So I'll just pause the video for a few minutes. So I just refreshed the page and it took a few seconds, but as we can see now, my resource is now compliant. So we get the exact time at which it became compliant. And the really cool thing is that if I go to configuration timeline, I'm able to see that yes, some changes were made at 303, and if I click on changes, we can see the configuration changes that were done. So one rule basically disappeared. So this rule basically went away, which is the 0000/0. And this rule was added. So new permissions were added as a new rule, and I only allowed SSH from my IP. And so now we basically made this resource compliant, and over time we were able to track the compliance and why it happened, thanks also as well to the configuration timeline. So the idea is that at scale, basically, you're going to have a dashboard in which you're going to evaluate how many rules are non-compliant and how many resources are non-compliant. And you're going to set up as many rules as you need. It could be either the rules that are defined by AWS, which are quite handy, or custom rules that you want to define if you use AWS Lambda. But by defining all these rules and on all your resources, you basically have a great account view on which rules are doing what and how is your resource configuration changing over time for your entire resources on your entire AWS accounts, which I think in itself is really, really cool and nice. And I think something that should be enabled for everyone. Unfortunately, you have to pay for it. So it's just something you have to make a conscious decision for if you wanted to keep track of all your resources and all the rules you wanted. But definitely if you have a production AWS account and you need some compliance rules or against whatever you want, then have a look at config and set up as many rules as you can, because overall it is really, really nice dashboard to know how many times you have non-compliant rules and how to make your resources compliant over time. So I hope you liked it. I hope you understand how config works now, and I will see you in the next lecture.